Renana, how about you starting with the first question, which is how can the productivity of activities in the unorganized sector, both farm and non-farm, be improved?
Let me start with the farm sector. And before I make some suggestions or say some direction that I have been seeing, I think one of the things we should recognize and don't is what we are seeing as the feminization of the farm sector. And what do I mean by that? The ownership of land and is of course still in the hands of men, but especially in the small farms, the men are no longer working those small farms. It's women working those small farms. Casual labor, agricultural labor, the percentage of women as compared to men has increased. So it's women really. So when you think of a farmer, you still think of a man with a turban, but in fact, it's the women who are doing that, who are doing the farming. And the women doing the farming are still at the lowest manual level of farming. And what we have, just to take one example, iconic women transplanting rice. I think we still see that, but the movies about that, the pictures are well known. Well, is it really necessary to continuously transplant rice by hand? No, it's not. We have rice transplanters. And where I tell you about our own work, where we have introduced rice transplanters, the productivity has immediately gone up by 30%, and so has the earning. So I think I'll just start with one thing. I think appropriate technology in the farming sector is absolutely necessary. The reason it's not coming in is because for small farmers it's expensive. So you need to work on either not group farming exactly, but groups owning the technology and then using it within the village. So that's one solution. There's lots more, and as we go along, we can talk about that.
But how does this appropriate technology get developed? Who does it?
It's already there. It's already there. There's lots. There's zero tillage machines which exist. There's rice transplanters. There's small tractors. Everything is there. It's how do you reach it to those people who own the small farms, because we still are a country of small farms. I think that is the big gap.
So it's unaffordable.
It's unaffordable for one person, yes, but it's affordable at a somewhat larger level.
But can I comment on this? Traditionally in India, in any given village, you would have at the most 2 people who would take care of the entire tilling, the plowmen. Plowmen used to be very few. They used to be almost like a subcaste on the road. So these guys were doing it commercially for everybody else. I don't see what the problem is in sort of transposing that plowman into a
small tractor
or one of these machines that you're talking about. I mean, it shouldn't be such a big deal, and it then becomes a commercial proposition.
Yes, it does. And in fact, in some parts of the country, say Gujarat, I've seen it in Tamil Nadu, but in the large parts of the country, it hasn't happened yet.
But what's the reason for it?
What's stopping it?
What's stopping it? I mean, is there a social resistance, a cultural resistance? What is it?
I think there's no proper commercial model yet. I haven't seen it. We haven't seen it.
So do you think this is a problem of the extension workers, that they're not actually getting this message across?
I think it's a problem of, on the one hand, financing, and on the other hand, the richer people in the village are not interested in doing that. I think that's sort of the 2 things that I have seen. But I have also seen in villages where one or two such machines have come in and the local people are using it, things really change.
Yeah, but I would imagine so.
Yeah.
Because I thought, mostly farmers never let go of a profitable opportunity, right? BT cotton or something, if somehow they can access it, if they get credit for it. So I doubt if it is just ignorance, right, on their part.
And I'm coming back to my original point, which is they're all the women who don't get credit. The farmers, going back to my original point, the farmers are no longer the men. They're not doing that work. They're doing something else.
But who is marketing the produce? The men.
The men are marketing the produce.
Because this
Usually,
is something
yeah.
we've been talking about for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
That women would produce handicrafts, but the men would sell them, and therefore it would be shown as man's work. Because
Yeah.
he was the one who was actually doing the commercial act. So that could be part of the problem.
Let's take that point further, which is your point on the labor force participation rate. Ideas for India had a wonderful series of papers on that. I'll give you my take on it, which is, with all apologies to you, I think the NSS is not capturing what women are really doing.
No, I'm perfectly prepared to believe that.
I want to give you an example because I did that a few years ago, which was we did a study in Bihar, and we had the Institute of Human Development, Jerry Rogers. He did a really good micro study using the same definitions of women's work. And the NSS, I think, was coming up with 11% female work participation rate in Bihar. And Jerry's study was 56%. Now, the issue there, of course, is that the kind of work women are doing are very low productivity, and they also don't recognize it as their own work. So livestock, farming again.
On that, can I comment? The NSS data on that is very clear. Livestock is actually very high productivity work. I mean, at the time, the same study that you're talking about, if my memory is right, it used to give an income of 80,000 rupees. And
That's if you're doing only livestock. If you're doing
only livestock.
Yeah, but mostly they do have one,
Yeah,
two, three
yeah,
cattle.
I know.
Yeah. So that's one thing. But the other thing, of course, is that that most of what they're doing is low productivity. So going back to I've sort of gone away from your very large question of what do you do to raise productivity, is how do you bring more women into the work, or how do you bring women into a productive workforce? And why is there really a decline? And that, again, I don't know if the NSS figures are correct. But
I don't think it is.
Okay.
Because,
I don't know if the decline is correct either. So I just want to put that out.
It is the point that you're making that it completely contradicts the feminization of agriculture.
Yeah.
I think everybody knows that that's happened. I don't think NSS is designed to capture that. Because again, what happens in NSS is that you ask the question of the so-called head of the household, which is almost invariably male, who promptly appropriates this as his work.
Yeah.
Right? So you have male employment, male productivity, great, it's not bad at all. Women, not to be seen. So it's just an invisibility problem, and it's a problem, I think, of asking the right kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Can I speculate a little bit on what Renana was saying? If there is technology which can clearly break you out of that and doesn't get adopted, and the question you're also asking, is it just a question of ignorance? At one level, one feels it's not just that. If it is just that, it's a little bit of extension work, send people out, and that's it, they will adopt. What is possible, and I'm just putting together little bits and pieces of information from Pranab and all of you, is that it's possible, what you said, that there are the better off people, the richer farmers, who don't have an interest in this. It's still endogenous, it's a trap, it's not clear how you'll break, and you can see something over here, which we discount usually. Laborers in a region being very poor, is an advantage to a rich farmer who has to employ them because their reservation wage is very low. You get cheaper labor. It's not in your collective interest among the richer people in your village and neighboring villages to do something which is going to generally raise the standard of living over there and make the labor price go up. So it's possible that it's something like that. It's not easy to solve because if it is someone's interest that is blocking it, it makes it much harder, and it's possible that that is.
NREGS is supposed to link precisely the reservation wage problem. The problem that we are talking about now persists till today.
Yeah.
So the reservation wage problem should have been taken care of once NREGS was introduced.
Yeah.
Except it has happened in certain ways.
Yeah.
I mean, clearly the Bihari worker is getting more out of the Punjabi farmer than he was earlier, but not in terms of the technology.
But that could cut both ways, that the incentive for the change also goes down if you have, so it's possible.
Now you're flipping.
There's another issue connected with that, and again, we don't have the figures on that. How can we get those? Which is, and I'm saying this purely on observation basis in a few states, which is that there is a shift away from hiring labor to sharecropping out. So, so somebody who owns the farm is usually just sharecropping out rather than hiring in labor and actually farming. And I don't know if that shift in pattern changes the landowner's incentive to invest. I think that also makes a difference.
It does. The heart of the problem that Renana is talking about is really small and marginal farmers and landless workers. And the likelihood is that as far as the landless labor is concerned, a lot of them would, if they could, simply opt out of farming in its entirety. So whether that will increase the productivity or not, we don't know, because that depends upon whether labor shortage is created. We're nowhere near that. But the chances are that these people simply move out. I'm not sure it would help agricultural productivity per se. Productivity of workers at large, yes.
Can I jump to another sector, which is connected, which is construction?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the landless actually go into construction. Even the marginal farmers go into construction. And again, quantitative is up to you, but what we have seen is that construction, the whole organization of production in construction, organization of construction is such that skills don't have a high premium at all. So a worker can acquire skills and still, until the worker, and it's usually a male worker now, becomes a small contractor, their wages or whatever they earn remains extremely low. And it's because, again, going back to the organized sector issue, most construction, you can have an organized sector construction firm, and they're hiring contractors who hire labor contractors who hire small labor contractors. So the whole, how do you change that chain of production, that method of production, where there is no premium to skills? I say this because we have a training program on skills for construction workers, and there really is no premium.
No, I think the data also bears that out, by the way, which is this work being done on return to education and skills.
Yeah.
And it suggests that there is a huge band in which there's absolutely no change in the earnings.
Yes, yes.
When you go beyond that, it suddenly jumps by about 40%.
One interesting thing, Pranab, you'll be more familiar with the data, is over 12-year period from 2000 to 2012, the growth of construction workers has been bigger than virtually any other sector. If you take the big chunks, sort of services, So one possibility is also that whatever be the reason, they are coming in, and that's drowning some of the wage increase which could have taken place, because the increase is quite substantially larger than in the other sectors. So it's possible that there's a supply side effect which is driving.
No, but there is a skill thing that came out at the same period where really skilled operators, we are not talking about masons now. We are now talking about bulldozer operators, crane operators, that kind of stuff. They became scarcer than a software developer. So their wages just went through the ceiling. And the turnover rate was amazing. So there is a skill issue, but of what variety?
Finally, improving productivity in informal sector is really a matter of improving human capital, and that is education. And this is where I think there's a fundamental failure, right? This is what our friend Vilima Wadhwa here has been spending the last many years trying to see how the quality of education can be improved. As you know, they do this survey every year to just measure the quality of learning rather than enrollment and number of years. And it's fair to say that not only there has not been an improvement, there has been a decline, steady decline, and it's quite a
Can I make
bad scene. Yeah.
one remark on this? Yeah, you know, I think it's a very valid point, and especially skill, which is not just plain rote education, but skill which will make you much more employable. The problem here is that the private sector on this has no interest in doing it and won't do it for the following reason, that you acquire people, you give them skills to do your job, you take the burden of giving them the skills, their bargaining power increases, they move elsewhere, and so the private sector won't step in. Here I feel squarely the responsibility is with the state or the government. You have to do that, and we've seen this in rich countries which have done that well, like Germany has weathered a crisis a little bit better than other countries when you've provided the skills. So I'm just emphasizing that it's indeed extremely important, and it's by and large the responsibility of the state. Yeah.
You know, the German system works entirely on apprenticeship.
Yeah, I
It's
know.
about
that.
90%
I agree.
apprenticeship. Apprenticeship means that you're actually getting the private sector and saying you will impart skills. Whether you retain them or not is a separate issue, but thou shalt do it. So the system that they have is making it practically mandatory. Now, in a sense, I think we've tried to move a little bit in that direction with the amendment to the Apprenticeship Act, but we're not there yet. But think about what we're trying to do, where you're spending large amounts of money, which is skill development programs, which is 20 years out of date today.
Yeah.
And at the rate technology is changing,
Right.
you're going to be 50 years out of date very soon.
Yeah.
Yeah, but even more fundamental question is, you know, skilling, etc. We're talking about apprenticeship at some level, right? When the basic foundation, when the primary education is hard, I mean, this is what these surveys show, right? Now you're imparting skills to people who can't read very well, who can't do simple arithmetic very well, right? Like, how do you skill them?
I think I fully agree how bad the education system is. But I think we're very pessimistic. I mean, it's a very pessimistic view that you're putting out. Today, being an illiterate person is no longer viable. You'll get no jobs, no work. Whereas 15 years ago, as I was saying, most people were illiterate. Now, if you've passed 7th class, you're at a certain level. Yes, it's not a very good level, but if you did not pass that, you would have nothing. So I think our standards have gone up in that we cannot be illiterate anymore. But I would say another thing, which is our education system also doesn't look at skills at all. No. You don't, you have to pass 12th class, then you go into skills. Surely there are skills that can start being introduced right at the secondary level.
You know, you say the standards have gone up. I think the requirement has gone up.
Yeah.
Standards have fallen.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what
You're right.
Right? But that is even worse, right? Requirement has gone up, standards have fallen, there's a gap, and so people are even more frustrated.
I'm very curious about one thing. Renana travels quite a bit around the country. I do some of it. I find you go to the smallest village,
Yeah.
You have people working on cell phones. Now, clearly their literacy levels are good enough for them to do things with the cell phone that you and I can't. So, at least, I don't know about their numeracy skills, but their literacy skills seem to be pretty much good enough. And I believe the communication revolution is actually helping this process along. So how much education they're getting out of the cell phones, I don't know. It may, in fact, be quite substantial.